I'll be giving a talk on the B-Spice mission, the Beam-Spacecraft Plasma Interaction and Charging Experiment. It's another mouthful. I tend to like very long titles, apparently. But this is a sounding rocket mission that flew back November of last year. It was HELIOTECH funded. And before I start, I just want to take a quick moment to thank all of the teams at White Sands, NASROC, and NASA Wallops, because this wouldn't have launched without them to begin with, but also because they were incredibly patient and very supportive as my team basically figured out how different sounding rocket missions are from your traditional CubeSat or larger satellite mission. It was a very fun learning experience, and so thank you very much. I'm going to skip the outline just to make sure we have enough time to get to the data at the end. So what were we trying to answer with the B-Spice mission? This was really a tech demo style of mission, and this all was born out of really trying to understand auroral drivers. And so Joe Borowski has been championing the Connect mission, now the MEO mission, and really they're trying, and the idea is to effectively park a satellite out in the magnetosphere, aim an electron beam down the magnetic field lines, and fire it towards the Earth's atmosphere where the beam spot can be picked up. So we saw on Wednesday there are ways to do this using the natural plasma wave phenomena that already occur, but in this style we don't wait for the waves to happen. We basically create our own electron beam system. But there's a problem when you want to fire electron beams out in the magnetosphere. There's just not enough plasma to balance you out, and so you charge up positively and you get beam return. And so that's what the video on the right is showing, and based off of missions like SCATHA, when you get significant beam return, you're going to damage your instruments and it's not going to be a good time. Here it's even worse because you need the beam to reach the Earth's atmosphere to get any data to begin with. And so this poses the question, right? How can we ensure that we can mitigate all charging on the spacecraft to ensure this beam can escape? So some work at Los Alamos and the University of Michigan has happened for several years now that seems to indicate that the most probable solution to this is to emit your own plasma cloud. You basically put a plasma source with your electron beam. That plasma source is going to produce a dense quasi-neutral plasma, and whenever you fire the electron beam, you'll get ion emission from the edge of the plasma cloud, neutralizing your spacecraft and allowing the beam to escape. So this gives you an idea of the vehicle diagram of the B-Spice mission. This was an incredibly complex mission. To begin, the rocket launches nearly vertical and then flips onto its side. So it is flying perpendicular to the local magnetic field, and then it separates in two. So it's not just a rocket, it's a tethered rocket. And this was done in such a way so that the main payload could experience all of the charging events that we wanted to induce on it, and the sub-payload could act as an electrical reference, and we can actually measure how much charging we had. There is a linear probe on the sub-payload. That is an entire talk in and of itself, so it won't be really discussed too much here. We're only going to be focusing on the main payload section. And so the way we did this, that apogee is a little high, but the way we did this is we basically went through a series of science sequences where the first science sequence was focused on varying our ion contactor current, which is basically the plasma current. How much plasma current are you producing? And we were also looking at contactor expansion time. So how long should you wait, basically, before you fire this electron beam? The second science sequence really looked at efficiency, right? Can you get away with an inefficient cathode system, or do you need a very efficient cathode system to be able to feasibly get this mitigation to happen? And so throughout the entire flight, we would switch between a series of science sequence 1s followed by a science sequence 2, and then we would pause for 1 second so that the ACS on the main system could reorient itself if need be, and then we would start. So we did this whole mission on a 27-second cycle, 26 seconds of science time. We would get a signal from the ACS team. We would stop our science. The ACS would do its thing, and then we would restart again. A lot of coordination. So the instrumentation. This is the plasma contactor. It was provided by John Williams' team over at Colorado, and it's really composed of two separate instruments. It's the hidden anode plasma contactor. The topmost contactor with the smaller beam is always lit. It's a very low power, I think just a couple of milliamps worth of ion current, and it's on the entire time. The bigger contactor just below that, that's the hidden anode, and that system allowed us to vary the ion production from 0.5 milliamp when just the HCA was on to up to 800 milliamps when the entire system was on. And this was necessary because we were asking their contactor to operate at very fast speeds. We basically were asking them to go from off to on and stable within 200 milliseconds, which is, for anybody who's worked with these contactors, very tall feat when you normally operate them on the terms of, on the timescales of minutes to hours for stability. So they did a tremendous job, and it worked wonderfully. The bottommost image, I'll be showing post-flight pictures, and so that is the HAPC after the whole thing has landed. Next up is the electron beam assembly. This is basically a thermionic electron emitter. We designed it to emit about 150 milliamps at 1 keV. At the end of the day, we got a little over 900 volts and 163 milliamps, but we know from chamber testing that we lost about 13% of that to just hitting the housing itself. And so really we got about 143 milliamps of emission, which is still more than enough to completely saturate the ionosphere and giving it, basically there was no hope of the ionosphere neutralizing this thing because of how much current we were pushing out, which was the goal. The teledeployer and voltage monitor system was a collaboration between NASA Wallops and the University of Michigan. The University of Michigan created the voltage monitor itself, and so it would measure up to 1,500 volts positive. And the teledeployment system and the tether reel system was developed over at NASA Wallops. They had the challenging task of making sure we got about 30 meters of separation by the time the mission started, which I think gave about 20 seconds to do the entire separation. And they made it happen. So you have two pictures here on the right-hand side. The first is before deployment. They had a series of LEDs to help with triangulating how far they were alongside all of the other instruments that they used for positioning. And lower down, the bottom right image is, I think, near maximum deployment. That line that you see there, that's the Earth. So that's a very nice shot. Forgot to mention a couple of lessons learned that I'll be saying along the way. This spacecraft potential monitor, the voltage monitor, only measures positive potentials. We were only worried about measuring the positive charging induced by the electron beam. This ultimately gives us a little bit of a blind spot when we neutralize things fully later on, but we can't tell if we are truly zeroed out or if we had started to float negative because of how the HAPC was connected to Rocket Common. And lastly, we have the skin-mounted current sensors. These are basically two gold-plated planar probes that were mounted flush with the rocket body. One was perpendicular to the magnetic field, the other one was parallel. This was really just there to tell us, as a second indicator to tell us how much charging we had on the rocket when we were positively charged. And the two orientations are there to inform PIC simulations from the Los Alamos team that are currently ongoing. Like the voltage monitor, we only really cared about electron current at the time. And so we've designed these to only measure positive current. In hindsight, getting a full range of both positive and negative would have been preferred to be able to see how negatively charged we became. And so I flew through this presentation, but that's good because now we get to talk quite a bit. So, oh, I guess I didn't fly through this. I timed it perfectly. So here, this is the cleanest data that we have to date. While the mission launch was very successful and we do have very nice data, we unfortunately ran into a race condition that was not picked up on any of the simulated runs while we were on the ground, and it only happened, as these race conditions tend to do, while we were flying. So what that means is that we have data from the initial experiment period where everything is starting to turn on, so we know things have turned on nicely, and then we have data roughly for 30 seconds before the mission ends. And that's about 100 kilometers at altitude. We typically wanted to operate about 150 kilometers in altitude, so we're working with data that's decent, it's good, but it's not our ideal. Even so though, what I'm showing here is a series of shots throughout science sequence 1. The blue at the very top plot, the blue marks are the EVA emission currents. You see they're very steady throughout the entire series. And then the red marks are the HAPC currents that we're pushing through. So these are basically the net current as measured by the HAPC. These are both ion and electron currents. And as the sequence goes on, you see that initially the HAPC currents are below the EVA emission, and then eventually it meets it and then supersedes it. And so this was done on purpose. We had some series where we actively emitted less plasma current than electron beam emission current. This should give us some charging. And then eventually we went well above the beam emission current, and this should give us no charging. And sure enough, that's what we see. From skin-mounted current sensor A, we see that when the electron beam is the only thing to emit, we get pretty much the maximum amount of current that we're going to see off of those skin-mounted current sensors, indicating we're around high 800s, low 900 volts of charging on the system. The TDVM is also measuring fairly high charging. It's not the 900 volts you would expect because unfortunately the main and sub got a little close together, so we think we're seeing some sheath effects, but we're still seeing charging nonetheless, which is exactly what we were hoping for. In the next couple of shots, we got diminished charging. This is because now the HAPC is starting to mitigate some of this induced charge by the electron beam, but it just doesn't have enough to fully mitigate it. And by the time we got the HAPC currents matching the EVA currents, we're seeing basically no charging. Whether or not it's negatively charged due to the HAPC, we simply don't know. But at this point, what we can say is that yes, the HAPC has mitigated the charge. And my opinion right now, I'm not going to have like the plots to back it up, is that this is mostly due to ion emission from the HAPC. And the reason for that is that we're really limited by what the ion current production on the HAPC is. If this was due to electron current collection, you would always basically see full mitigation as the plume is able to take in enough electrons to balance out that electron beam emission. That's not what we're seeing. What we're instead seeing is you are charging yourself even though you have a large plume, simply because you don't have enough ions in the plasma, in the created plasma plume to neutralize the electron beam. But that's what we're working towards, which means right now we see the first hurdle, right? Does the plasma contactor neutralize the electron beam? Yes. Perfect. The next step now is within the plasma plume itself, separating what the ion emission is from any electron collection through the plume, and that'll be the indication that it's ion emission that's neutralizing this electron beam and not electron current collection. If this all works out, you'll have a fully validated ion emission concept, And then, so the next steps would be pushing this for active beam experiments in the magnetosphere, but we're also validating numerical CPIC tools for Los Alamos along the way. Thank you very much.